Hello, and welcome to the Brave New Weed podcast. And now, here's your host, Joe Dolce.
Welcome to the Brave New Weed podcast. This is high-minded conversations for the post-prohibition era, which I think we are rapidly approaching, folks. I'm your host, Joe Dolce, and joining me on the other end of the line is Matthew Hendershot.
Thank you so much for having me back again, Joe. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump all over your introduction there.
It's okay. Welcome, Matthew. Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to hear from you too, Joe. It's always a pleasure.
We have a really great episode. This is one of my favorite episodes. It's an interview. It's called The Nerdery of Puffery. And what we're really doing is diving very deeply into the mechanics, the science, the technology of vaporization with the founder of Firefly, Mark Williams. He's a great guy and he's extremely well spoken. And he's going to tell us really how to get the most from your vaporizer, and in particular, the new vaporizer that they are just releasing called the Firefly 2 Plus. And Matthew, this episode is actually brought to you by Firefly, which I'm really, really, really excited about because this is a product I've now been using for a couple of weeks. And I have to tell you, it has really opened my eyes to how great vaporization can be again. First of all, the flavor that you get from the Firefly 2 Plus is just extraordinary. It's almost like dissecting cannabis. You can taste all these different terps and different compounds within the plant that you just don't get from regular inhalation, or certainly not from a conduction vapor. The beauty of Firefly is that it's a convection vaporizer. It actually melts the oils rather than burning the oils. So every inhalation is fresh and actually sort of exciting on the lungs. The other thing I love about this Firefly 2 Plus, the plus means more airflow. If you've used a Firefly before or other vaporizers, you may know that the draw was a little sticky. In this iteration of the vaporizer, they've really solved that problem, and the draw is easy and free, and it's a real pleasure. I also particularly like the fact that the price is about $100 lower than the original Firefly. It's coming in at $249, which is fantastic. And they also have done some great, beautiful design to this. The one I chose was a zebra wood finish, which people look at, and it actually becomes a point of conversation when you bring it out at a party. So thank you so much, Firefly, for sponsoring the Brave New Weed podcast. And listeners, I want to tell you one more great thing, which is that if you're interested in exploring the Firefly 2 Plus, you can get 20% off if you use the coupon code BRAVE. And what you do is you go to thefirefly.com, that's thefirefly.com, type in the coupon code BRAVE, and you will get 20% off of the retail price, which is $249. And that is good until June 20th, 2019. So I think it's a great offer. It's a generous company. It's a great vaporizer. I wholeheartedly stand behind it, and I encourage you that if you're in the market for a great convection vaporizer, this is an excellent choice. Okay, so we're going to do a quick news segment here because we have a lot to talk about this episode. Matthew, what have you seen that's of interest in the news lately?
Well, again, the wave sort of rolls on. You know, Illinois is getting ready to do its voting, and we're going to see if they're going to move into the brave new weed world of legalization. Moving and changing at those levels is going on all the time. One thing that did come across my desk that caught my attention was a bit of an article that came out of The Verge, which has a little bit of a misleading headline about Google. And it's banning, well, the headline in this article discussed that Google has banned marijuana delivery companies from selling weed in applications that are available on the Google Play Store. This turns out to be a little bit of a misrepresentation of the truth. But in fact, Google has come out and stated and sort of restated original rules that they had for the Google Play Store that bans apps from facilitating the sale of marijuana. Whether these are legally operated or not, Google is stepping up and saying that your app in the Play Store cannot actually have a shopping cart that sells cannabis or cannabis products.
Google really doesn't want to risk breaking the law, does it? That's what this is about, right?
I believe so. It's really funny how the law is written. I think that by the book, the words and terminology are you cannot use a telefacsimile machine to facilitate an illegal drug deal. And that
would absolve Google from that problem, wouldn't it?
Well, I think that they've used, obviously you can tell how dated that law is from when it was written, but that's often used to apply to cell phones, emails, text messages, anything like that. At a federal level, if the FBI wants to get in and really bust up something, they can say, here, we have intercepted these text messages and clearly you're purchasing an illegal substance.
I just keep wishing that the founders of Google, who we know love to go to Burning Man, who we know employ thousands of people who use cannabis daily, if not more, would say we don't really stand by this, but we're not at liberty to break the law. Our investors would kill us if we did. I just wish there would be that level of honesty, but I guess I'm asking too much from the heights of corporate America or the world corporations.
Well, Google has stepped up and issued a statement saying that they're not shutting down these applications. They are actually actively working with the developers to make sure that they're not running afoul of the rules, so that applications like Weed Maps doesn't get itself in trouble and actually become banned from the Apple Store. Right?
Okay. All right. Okay.
The truth of it is, the Apple Store products, actually, you're not allowed to sell any sort of controlled substance, even tobacco or anything that is excessive amounts of alcohol through applications. So this is also not specific to cannabis or cannabis-related products. It's actually true. You can't have an app that sells cigarettes. So
that's true, but thankfully you can have an app that sells vaporizers. So let's get into the interview with Mark Williams right now. As I said to you earlier in the episode, Mark is the founder of Firefly. He's been at it for a good number of years. This is his third iteration. He comes from Apple, so he understands design, he understands UX. He really has a great understanding of the science, the technology, the aesthetics, the current situation, and the future of vaporization. And really, without further ado, let's just get into this interview because it's really long, it's really interesting, and it's really in-depth.
Cool, actually.
I'm here with Mark Williams. Mark, what's your title, just for clarity purposes?
It depends who you ask, but
I'm asking you.
For professional purposes, you could call me co-founder of Firefly, and right now I occupy the position of Chief Product Officer and Chief Technology Officer.
Now, how old is Firefly?
Firefly is now 8.5 years old since we founded the company.
Okay.
And we've had product on the market for 6 years.
Okay. So, Mark, thanks for joining us today. Great to see you.
Nice to be here with you,
Nice to see
Joe.
you in New York.
Pleasure
out of your
to see
comfort
you,
zone of California.
Well, if you're going to travel somewhere, this is one of the best places in the world to come. So,
I want to ask you first about the new Firefly Vaporizer. So I know the old Firefly because you and I have met before, and listeners of this podcast obviously know that we've met before because there's evidence about that. But you're now releasing another product, and it is called the
Firefly 2 Plus.
Now, what is going to distinguish? It looks a lot like Firefly 1 and Firefly 2, as a matter of fact. What is distinguishing about this new vaporizer?
A couple things. The main thing is that the plus stands for plus airflow, plus more airflow.
Which means it's easier to suck?
Correct. Really simple. Not rocket science, but we listen really carefully to both our fans and our critics alike. And over time, with enough listening, we came to the idea that, hey, we could make it easier to draw and people would like that better. I know that sounds really simple, but sometimes it takes a
so
long...
obvious,
It
right?
sounds so obvious that it took a while to... You know what was the thing that was that little push over the cliff?
No.
It was a really nice, engaging note from one of our customers who lives in Wales. And he sent disc, a metal disc, that similar to what we use in the device. And he said, "Hey, I drilled this one myself, and I thought maybe you'd want to try it and see if you thought that this airflow worked better than what comes with a Firefly." And first of all, it's just really great when your customers care enough to reach out to you like that. And his name is Lawrence Fansa. Really nice fellow. And the fact that he took the time to do this really made an impression on me. So I tried it, of course, assembled it right up. And it had some things about it that were really great. I was like, hey, this is easier. It was a little too heavy. The metal was too thick, so it changed some thermal characteristics. But that wasn't really the core thing. The core thing was that more airflow is more better, basically.
Is Lawrence an engineer?
I'm not sure actually what Lawrence's professional background is. I'll ask him. We
Okay. I'm just
correspond.
curious.
By email,
I know he's
so.
a cannabist, but I'm just curious if he's an engineer.
He might be.
So we've got more air coming in.
We have more air coming in, and that changes everything because it changes how long you can inhale comfortably, which means you can settle into a puff really nicely because you're not feeling like this, what's called negative pressure. Against your lungs. It's just more of an easy inhalation. Think our people out there can just imagine it that you're going from sipping through a cocktail straw to sipping through a regular soda straw.
Made out of paper because we don't like plastic straws.
Absolutely
anymore.
absolutely made out of paper.
Good. So that's one virtue, more air. Mosuck. What else? I know it's a lot less expensive. What's the new price on this one?
In fact, we can even say it sucks more now.
It sucks more.
Yeah, it sucks more.
It sucks
That's
more.
I think that might be a marketing slogan.
Have you read my friend Karen Rinaldi's book called "It's Perfectly Good to Suck at Something"?
No, I haven't. But
it's a great book. It's about it's the antidote to perfection. Actually, it's like matter. Even if you suck at something, it's worth doing if you love it because it's a passion.
I like that.
I'll show it to you later.
Thank you.
Okay, so Mosuck.
Okay.
It sucks more.
Mosuck. So with that, we refactored our heating algorithm, basically the brains behind how heat gets applied. Because as you increase the airflow, it changes the transfer rate of heat from our heating coil to the air path because it's slightly different. So you have to kind of massage that so that everything works out. And so consider it massaged.
Okay.
And it's the kind of thing I do actually for fun when I can't go to sleep, as I get deep into our heating algorithm and write new functions and then try them out in our prototyping app. In any case, it's just the delight of nerdery. The point being that we keep on making the way that we apply heat more better by understanding the data, understanding people's use of it, so that we make it more sophisticated, so it just delivers more satisfying vapor.
A couple of things I want to talk about with that. So I would like you to explain to everybody, because I know this, but I know a lot of people still don't understand the difference between convection and conduction vaporizers. I find it to be, now that I know it, I find it to be a world of difference. It's really hard for me to go back to conduction. Firefly is a convection vaporizer. How do you explain it to folks in a neat, easy, non-nerdy way?
Well, I'll do my best. You tell me how well I do with this, Joe. So Firefly actually invented the portable convection vaporizer.
Oh.
We're the first ones.
Okay.
We invented it. Now, to be fair and to give kudos where they are very well deserved, we were inspired by the Volcano originally, the original convection vaporizer. And we said, hey, what if we could do something that made vapor that was as good or better than this? And we did it in the portable form factor. So that was the inspiration, and we developed the first portable convection vaporizer. So the difference between convection and conduction. Convection simply is heating with air, with hot air. And conduction is heating with direct contact, like cracking an egg in a frying pan. That's conduction heating. And the two are, the two are fundamentally different in that in one, your heat source doesn't touch the thing that you're heating, and in the other, it does touch the thing that you're heating. But the practical implication of that is that convection vaporizers can only touch your thing that you're heating when you want them to, meaning that you're inhaling with the Firefly 2 or the 2 Plus, you're inhaling, and that means the hot air is contacting your material and extracting the vapor, and you stop inhaling, and that means the heat is no longer contacting your material. So basically everything stops, which is exactly what you want, especially when you understand how cannabis changes with heat. Now with conduction vaporizers, there's a couple different classes, and I'll start with one that would be, with a type that would be similar to what the Firefly 2 can do. Let's say you can put loose leaf flower in there. Right?
Yes, yeah.
So those conduction vaporizers are basically like a little metal or ceramic bowl that they wrap a heating element around. And the thing is, it takes actually some energy to get that whole bowl plus the contents up to the temperature necessary to vaporize. So you're heating up your whole pot, let's say, right, and everything that's in it. The problem with that is that because that has what's called thermal mass, right? It's got a certain amount of weight to it, so you have to put a certain amount of energy into it in order to get it up to that temperature.
Yeah.
Much more energy, in fact, than you have to put into a convection system. What that creates is lag, meaning that once you've heated up the bowl, well, you've put all that energy in. Well, guess what? It takes a long time for that energy to get out. So once you've heated up the bowl, you might as well vape the whole bowl, because you've put in all that energy, and it's never going to be the same again after that. So it's not very responsive is the thing. So a conduction vape, it takes much longer to heat up. It takes, let's say, the best ones, conduction vapes heat up in about 30 seconds. And that's just because of the mass of what they're trying to heat up is pretty high, right? Whereas a convection vape, with the Firefly, we heat up in 3 seconds, because the mass of what we're heating up is much lower. We're just heating up the mass of the coil, the heating coil itself. So we are we are much more responsive as a result, which opens up different type of use models. So instead of sitting down and feeling like you're committed to a whole bowl as you would be with a conduction vape, you're committed to just as much puff as you want to take with the Firefly 2 Plus. So for people who have a use model of, I'll take a little 10-second puff and then I'll put it down and maybe I'll come back to it in half an hour. More the microdosing or as much as you want but no more dosing model, we're a much more flexible system because we're much more responsive. And that's basically because convection can be a lot more responsive than conduction when it applies to heating up a fairly large thing. Now, the second class of conduction vapes are pens, where you're basically exposing the liquid directly to a heating source, like a coil or a ceramic or something like that. That's also conduction. It's not used for flower. It's a smaller model, but that has some different dynamics because it's so much smaller. You use a lot less energy in those systems. So it's more like the Firefly model of it only heats when you are applying, when you're inhaling. And when you stop inhaling, it cools down pretty quickly. Now, it doesn't cool down immediately like the Firefly does because there's some residual heat in the heating elements, but more quickly. It's more of a momentary model. So conduction vapes can be more momentary if they're small enough.
Yeah, but there's another. Okay, so one of the things I notice all the time, I don't think I'm alone, is in those pen vaporizers, A, they clog a lot, and B, the oils get sort of nasty as that cartridge diminishes. And to me, it feels that they're just being burned off. And by the time you're at the bottom third of it, it doesn't taste very nice. And I don't like the taste so much that I barely use it. I mean, I have a lot of those not empty cartridges, but sort of a third left in those cartridges that I just never use again. I'm not sure if they're effective or not. Why is that happening? Is it in fact being burnt?
It depends on the temperature that the device is running at, but
those cheap pen batteries from China.
And who really knows, actually?
Good question.
Having been to a lot of those factories, I know that most pens that are sold actually are running way too hot. The reason is that actually gives people that gives the appearance of more vapor. And people think that that's what you want, actually. So they set the temperature so high that it's actually destroying the material as you're vaping it.
You're talking a bigger exhale? Like a more visible exhale? Is that what you're talking about?
Correct. And I would love, and it's going to be fun to get into this in a little bit of greater depth in this interview. Because
our interview on the nerdery of puffery. That's what this is going to be called.
Perfect.
Okay?
Perfect. But it actually is quite, once we find the right words to explain it, it's not nerdery at all. It's just patently obvious. But it involves displacing an existing paradigm that's been with us for decades.
Go on.
So to what you just said, to answer that first. So yes, you're right. For pens, the rate of volatilization of terpenes and cannabinoids is different. And that's largely because terpenes are more volatile, meaning that if you just leave them sitting around in a cup on a desk, they're basically just going to evaporate. Whereas cannabinoids will just sit there like oil because they're heavier. They have a heavier molecular weight than do the terpenes. So the terpenes just will off-gas on their own. So yes, you've noticed something that actually does happen, which is one can think of it as the rate of consumption of the terpenes and the cannabinoids is different in those pens. So when you're half done with your pen, most of the terpenes are gone because they volatilized more quickly than do the cannabinoids. But more has happened. Through repeated heat cycling, you have also changed the structure of some of the cannabinoids. Specifically, the acid forms of CBD and THC will change into more stable forms. In the case of THC, they'll change into delta-9 THC or even delta-8 THC, and CBDA will change into CBD. So you change them through repeated heat cycling. What you also are doing is you're changing delta-9 THC over time into CBN. Because delta-9 THC changes into CBN through repeated oxidation.
Right.
Oxidization, exactly. And that is precipitated by heat cycling.
So I just want to say to listeners that CBN is what happens when you put that bag of cannabis or weed in the garage for a year and forget about it, and then you take it out again and it's all dried and sort of brown. And it doesn't taste very good, but it is an effective thing for sleep.
Great for sleep.
It makes you really tired without much interesting psychoactivity going on, right?
Exactly. So if you want to use it for that purpose, perfect. The thing is, most people didn't buy that pen for that purpose.
That's right.
But it's funny, I've noticed the same thing, Joe. At the end of a lot of the pens, first of all the flavor and aromas are gone. And as we know, terpenes help to direct where the euphoria from delta-9 THC goes in terms of its more nuanced behavioral expressions, right? Limonene, something that has heavy on limonene is not the same feeling as something that's heavy with alpha-pinene.
That's right.
For instance. And you had a very interesting guest on about the terpene sommelier.
The terpenologist. Yes, Max Montrose.
Yes.
He was great, right?
It was great, yeah. And that's really what people are thinking of when they think of things like sativa, indica, and hybrid, which are largely useless terms, but they're really thinking more about the terpene profiles that are sort of typical in those classes. And there are terpenes that are associated with sedation and terpenes that are associated with stimulation. So that aside, yes, you've noticed something that's happening, but it's worse than you think. That you're towards the end of those pens, especially the big carts, like a gram cart, you're basically vaping a lot of CBN at the end because that's what you heat.
It's been heated so frequently.
Yes, yeah. You're basically vaping CBN without terpenes. So that's why a lot of people that's why a lot of people don't finish their carts.
Yeah,
basically. And we have some thinking around that for a new product that we are going to be introducing after the 2+. And let's just say we think very carefully about the tank size.
Let's come back to that, okay? I want to go to the vapor cloud because this is one thing that is interesting. So when I tried the 2+, I didn't really see a lot of exhale coming out, and I was concerned. I thought, am I not getting anything? Is there a lack of stimulus response going on there, right? I want reinforcement to know that my machine is working. Mm-hmm. So is that intentional that I didn't see a big vapor cloud? I mean, I knew it was working after 90 seconds. Thank you very much.
Right.
Okay? Just a little bit of patience, Joe, and you get the idea. But what's going on with your vapor cloud? Because is it still invisible?
Well, when you're doing it right, yes, it is. And for the simple reason that because the vapor stayed in your body and was absorbed.
Can't be though. Is it?
Of course it is. That's exactly what it is. It's really that simple. It's think. And so I'm really happy to get into this one.
Let's get into it.
Because God, it's taken me years to think about how to communicate this effectively to people. So when you're drinking a cocktail, do you ever take a big sip of your favorite beer or cocktail or glass of wine, whatever it is, and then spit out 3/4 of it?
Of course not.
Right. Well, that's exactly what someone is doing when they inhale off a vaporizer or anything like that and then blow out a big cloud. They're basically spitting out the vast majority of what they just paid for that they're hoping is going to create some positive effects for them. Because, a little bit of a description of combustion and vaporization is helpful to create some context here.
This is the nerdery of puffery, so please go deep.
I love this, the nerdery of puff. That's actually perfect.
You said it.
Oh,
I just
did
repeated it. I think you said it, or whatever.
Oh, I give credit to you, but nonetheless, it is what we're doing, and it's a lot of fun. So the paradigm of blowing out a big cloud comes from the primary consumption mechanism, which was smoking. So whether you're smoking a cigarette with tobacco or you're smoking cannabis, what's the same is that you're producing a bunch of stuff that you probably don't want in your body, not the least of which are just little tiny physical artifacts of tiny, hot, burning embers. And what you can think of if you blew them up under a microscope, they're like little tiny hot coals, literally tiny hot coals that you're breathing into your body. And as you can imagine, when those deposit onto your soft, tender mucosal surfaces in your throat and lungs, it hurts. And so the natural thing that people do is they exhale forcefully because it's your body saying, stop hurting me with this stuff. It literally hurts. And so because of this really terrible method of administration, smoking stuff, people got used to, wow, I inhale this in and it's really uncomfortable. That's because it's literally tiny burning hot coals in your lungs. And who wants that, right? Not to mention other byproducts of combustion, which are undesirable, like benzene, for instance. So it's natural that people would then exhale a bunch of stuff out in sort of an uncontrolled manner. And then, of course, everyone laughs at the sort of the stoner caricature of, that was a really big one, And that's because of just the method of administration was terrible, right? But the thing is, that set this precedent for the way you judge something's effectiveness is not the way you feel, but how big of an exhale. So that equated to like how big of a drink you took in some way. But in fact, it's not at all, because how much of that drink stayed in your body? Well, if you exhaled a second after you inhaled, not much. If you held it in for 10, 15 seconds, some amount of time, well, then all the stuff that you inhaled has time to deposit onto the surfaces of your lungs, which then gets absorbed into your bloodstream. That's how it works. That's basically how it works. It is a drug delivery mechanism. The cannabinoids and the terpenoids settle onto the surfaces of your lungs. They then get absorbed into your bloodstream, and then that's how it works. So it's what you keep inside you that matters.
But when we last met in San Francisco, we had a demonstration, and there was a lot of conversation about how long do you hold a vapor inhale for versus an inhalation of smoke. And
yes.
I think the result was you don't want to hold the smoke in at all. You want to get rid of it quickly.
Right.
Vapor, 3 to 5 seconds, get rid of it. Is that still your scientific evaluation of it?
No.
Okay.
So as long as you're comfortable, the longer you let it be in your lungs, the higher percentage of it will settle onto the surfaces of your lungs. Okay. It's kind of a simple thought, right?
It's quite easy, yeah.
It's quite easy, and of course, holding your breath for minutes at a time is not recommended.
You don't want to get dizzy,
but
right?
Basically, as long as you're comfortable, the longer you can do it, the more you're going to get stuff that settles onto the surfaces of your lungs, which is the whole point of it. Because the difference, of course, as we know, between vaporization and combustion is that vaporization isn't producing byproducts that you don't want in your body. All it's doing is that it is aerosolizing the solid and liquid forms of cannabinoids and terpenes in such a way that they become like this little gradient of aerosol in the air. You inhale that, and there's not anything in there that you don't want in your body. That's the whole point of vaporizing.
What's the temperature difference between combustion and vaporizing?
Depends.
Más o menos.
Yeah. So combustion generally happens over 450 degrees ish. It depends on the material being combusted, right? Because not everything has the same temperature of combustion. But let's just say
You're smoking a joint. It's 450 degrees.
No, it's not. The tip of a joint, like the tip of a cigarette, is more like 900 degrees. And so what you're inhaling is really hot. Now, by the time it gets from that cherry, the burning
Yes,
ember,
yes.
back to you, it's less.
Yes.
It's lower temperature than
Yes.
that. But it's still way too hot for your body to take in comfortably, which is why people naturally basically assume this paradigm of you have to blow a big cloud to show that it has been working, when in fact that is actually exactly the opposite. What that shows is that you're not keeping much of what you just inhaled in your body. That's what it shows. Back to the Firefly, the original concept with the Firefly was you put heat into the system with a convection heating, right? And then it impacts your material, vaporizes the material. And then as the vapor comes back to you, back to the mouthpiece, or you inhale it, it's actually cooling off. So we actually designed a reverse heat exchanger to take heat out of the system after we put heat into the system.
Okay.
Because would you rather take vapor into your lungs that is 400 Fahrenheit or 200 Fahrenheit?
Obviously now 200.
Correct. And
Thank you.
And
Got it right.
and everybody would want that. And so that's what we do. In fact, it's let's say if you set it for 400, it's 400 by the time when it's leaving the bowl. By the time it gets back to you, because we designed a cooling path into the device purposefully, it's dropped by 200 degrees.
Do all convection vaporizers have that reverse cool? No. Oh.
No, because it depends on a couple things. It depends on how long your cooling path is, right? Because if you've got one that's, a quarter inch long, well, guess what? It's not going to cool down in a quarter inch, right? Between, let's say, the bowl and when you're inhaling.
Yeah.
So if those two are right next to each other, then you're not going to get any cooling hardly, right?
How long is your cooling?
It's really long. Here, let me open this up. It is this long.
3 inches?
I'd say it's about 3 inches, but it's not just the length, it is the volume of the air, the volume of the space that the vapor is going into. So if you look at this entire volume, it's not just the length of our path, it's the volume of the path. So the vapor goes into essentially kind of a bigger area than the bowl, and as it spreads out in that bigger area, it loses heat. It's cooling down. So by the time it gets back to your mouth, we've measured this. Our vapor temperature, by the time it gets back to you, if you vaporize it at 400 degrees, is about 200 by the time you inhale it, which is much more comfortable than anyone else's product that I've ever tried.
But
honestly.
most convection vaporizers are quite comfortable to use. They don't feel hot, I have to say. I don't feel like it's like smoke. Mm-hmm. Am I correct? There must be a natural cooling in a convection vaporizer, right?
It depends on how long the cooling path is and if you have one. So the answer is yes, it can be, but it depends.
Okay.
So all these things add up to what we call vapor that's actually absorbable. Because the vapor that you exhale is basically wasted product. It's like taking a drink and spitting out your drink. It makes no sense. All it is it's a visual indication that you got something.
Yeah, which is important, though.
It's very important. It's very important, especially when it's a new technology that nobody understands.
Yeah.
But vaporization is not a new technology anymore. And what we are there's a user education thing, right?
Yes.
And which is getting people to get used to paying attention to how they feel. And which is in fact the whole reason why people are consuming cannabis in the first place.
It's a good point.
They want to feel a certain way. Now, I could demonstrate, by the way, the Firefly 2 Plus by taking a draw that I keep kind of up in my upper respiratory area and in my mouth and then blow out a big cloud. So I can show you that it's working by doing this inhale that kind of stays high. But what the Firefly 2 and 2 Plus are designed for is actually deep lung inhalation.
We'll make a video of that.
Oh,
you
great.
can show us, okay?
Great.
After the podcast, we'll have this as bonus material that anybody can see, okay? You can be the demonstrating model. We'll both be models on that one.
So to sort of summarize, if the only vapor that matters ultimately is vapor that you absorb. Everything else is waste. And so the question is, how much do you need to waste in order to have faith that something's working? Well, we've been making vaporizers for 6 years that really work, or else we wouldn't have been making them for this long. And we've sold hundreds of thousands because we make vaporizers that work. And so if somebody can take that, if somebody understands the analogy of why would you spit your drink out and realizes that this thing works and has enough self-awareness to evaluate how cannabis is working in their body, then, well, this is what we believe in and why we think that we've got a vaporizer that works really well for people, because it's designed to make vapor that you absorb. Yeah.
Your new vaporizer is $259, $49 retail?
$249.
$249. So that's maybe $100 less, $80 less than the other one. Is that about right?
Correct.
What's missing from it?
What
$80 am I not? What $80 am I not getting out of it?
So in the box, it comes with one battery now, not two.
Okay.
But one battery is all that you need. You can, of course, buy an extra battery. It comes with a few less accessories, like the cleaning kit doesn't come with it, but that's a separate thing and it doesn't cost a whole lot. Otherwise, it comes with everything it did previously. What we're doing, quite frankly, is that we're taking less margin on it because the market's in a different place than when we started selling the Firefly 2. We don't think we're no longer really in the early adopter phase of this technology.
Right.
We're now into sort of the mass market, the first quartile of the mass market, right? Of it diffusing into society, and so that group of consumers is more price conscious, and we acknowledge that. And so we also underwent a financial event fairly recently that allows.
Sounds ominous. A financial event.
It was great. A great financial event.
Okay, so what happened?
We got acquired.
There you go.
Which means that we've got a lot more room to play with margins, so that we can deliver products to consumers at prices that are really appealing to them.
Is vaporization a more efficient, cost-efficient way of using cannabis? I mean, in other words, am I using less to get more?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
No question about it?
No question. Well, compared to what, combustion, I'm assuming?
Yeah, smoking a joint versus using a vaporizer. Obviously, smoking a joint, 40% is going up in air, right?
Yeah, it's just burning when you're not even doing anything.
Right.
Similar to the way actually a conduction vape works, where it's just heating. It's basically heating off your terpenes when you're not inhaling, which is why, by the way, we have a convection vaporizer that doesn't do that.
Right.
So, yes, of course, it's more efficient, and you're going to spend way more on the material that you put into your vaporizer over the lifetime of its use than you will on the vaporizer itself. So why not optimize that financial situation where you're actually where 95% of what you bought actually gets into your body.
Yeah.
That's our whole point.
No, that's probably the best marketing you can do, right? Because people are buying probably a lot on price at this point, I'm sure, still. I mean, I know there's a connoisseur quality to what you're doing, and I respect that. But there's also just the market, the obvious thing. People buy on price a lot. So do you stress the fact that this is you're getting more of your cannabinoid, more cannabis into your system at a more efficient rate?
Not as much as we should have, but we're getting better at marketing.
Okay.
So yes, actually, that'll definitely be part of the way that we market the 2+, because it really is an inherent quality of it, right? I mean, I just explained the whole the whole absorption thing, and that's kind of the point, is that it's designed to actually make vapor that stays in your body, so it works.
And okay, no, I think that's a really good thing.
It's a total paradigm shift, Joe, actually, because this whole blowing the big cloud out thing it's well established in the culture, and I get that. At the same point, though, paradigms change, especially in response to new technology. It just takes enough of sort of enough people with a concept of a new paradigm when all of a sudden things start to tip. And because we feel like logic is kind of firmly on our side of, yeah, don't you want vapor that stays in your body because that's what you paid for? We know eventually that there's going to be a new paradigm, especially as people gain more confidence in the technology of vaporization.
Yeah.
And then they don't need to see that they have a big cloud because they know that it's working. And in fact, a big cloud will eventually be viewed as actually a silly thing to do because why are you spitting out your drink? I mean, that's silly.
We will see. We will see. Is it still hard to get people to use vaporizers?
No.
Okay.
It's not. Because the alternative form of consumption, at least for fast onset, smoking is so everyone acknowledges that it's terrible. So we don't see a big problem with it. I think the challenge that we and everyone else in this field has is to come up with a value propositions that are really simple and understood by people without too much explanation. So I've used a lot of words to describe the nerdery behind what's going on.
Yeah.
But ultimately, a simple value proposition is that the Firefly makes vapor that stays in your body.
There you go. So let's talk about another new product you're coming up with. So as much as I love the Firefly, it is not a discrete object. Like I can't palm it in my hand, right?
Right.
So do you have another device?
Yes. By the way, I would make one caveat to your point about discretion.
Go on. Caveat me away, man. Go.
Okay. There's visual discretion, right?
Yes.
And that matters if like you're out and you're out and about.
Yeah.
But there's also smell discretion.
There sure is. Olfactory discretion.
Olfactory discretion. Thank you. And there is no vaporizer that can compete with the Firefly 2 and 2 Plus for olfactory discretion. And guess what? Here's the reason.
No cloud.
Because the vapor stayed in your body.
Yeah, okay. I think I got the point now. Yeah.
Right. And actually, so the olfactory discretion thing is actually a really a big thing. It's also not just a discretion. It's a consideration thing, right? Because let's say you're at home and you're imbibing, and your partner doesn't, or guests, or whomever is in your vicinity doesn't want to share that experience with you. And of course, we want to be respectful to people's wishes. So if you're gonna vaporize something, rather than having to go outside on the landing, it's nice to have something that's not stinking up the joint.
I hear you.
Right?
Or as it were, stinking up the joint.
Stinking up the joint.
So I think you have another product coming out, right? Out of your pocket will come.
We do.
Something new.
Something new.
Let's see what you have. What magic are you going to produce here?
I'm going to produce the Firefly Mini.
Firefly Mini. Oh, she's a pretty little girl.
I'm glad
This
you
one
think
is
so.
the color of copper, right? Is it copper? Rose gold?
I'd call that one a rose gold.
Rose gold. That's very big with women. Women love rose gold. And what are you holding in your hand? I'm looking at two models of this. That's gold.
This is gold.
And is there a third
There's a number of colors.
Is there anything in this?
Yes. That is LA Confidential, by the way.
Called gelato.
Those were the labels I had in my studio, in my office.
The strain is called LA Confidential?
The strain in there is called LA Confidential, yes.
Give me just a hint about it. What do I know? What do I need to know about it? Give me a terpene.
I can't.
You can't. All right. What's the one in your gold?
And I'd like to edit that one. I'd like to edit.
We'll just get rid of that whole thing.
Thanks.
We'll just get rid of the whole thing.
What's in these is not important right now.
Okay.
It's the form factor.
Okay.
And and a number of other things.
Okay. Let's talk about. So this is a handsome device, which we will show again on a video. What's interesting about it?
So a couple things. There you go. You can take a nice, relaxed, longer draw. Hope you like the flavor.
It's good. Thank you.
It's what's notable about it are a couple things. Number one, it's running at a much lower temperature than most pen vapes. Most pen vapes are running at 500 Fahrenheit and above. And part of that is to make as big a cloud as possible. And part of that is because people just don't know. Yeah. And part of it is because most of the products in this category are white labeled from factories in China that up until recently just made e-cigs. And you can vaporize e-cig liquid at a very high temperature. In fact, people do, because in that there's a lot of, how big is your cloud type thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so most of those manufacturers make pens that are vaporizing at temperatures suited for e-cigs, which is absolutely too hot for
What temperature
cannabis.
are yours at?
We're at about 430 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay.
And that was chosen intentionally, of course, because it's hot enough to vaporize every cannabinoid. THCV, for instance, is the highest temperature vaporizing cannabinoid, around 428. And almost all terpenes vaporize below 430. So 430 is about as low as you can make it, but still get complete vaporization of every cannabinoid. And we're running about 100 degrees lower than most other pens. And the result is that you still get full vaporization, but the result is much more comfortable vapor. So once again, you can keep it in your body. So that's the first thing, is a lower temperature. Second thing is our tank size is a 0.3.
So a third.
Yeah.
Third of a gram.
Yeah, a third of a gram, because back to the heat cycling thing we talked about before, with current technology, there's no way to keep the rates of volatilization of the terpenes and the cannabinoids from changing. Now, I'll be working on that over the next few years, so I'm sure myself and others in this industry will make progress on that. But right now, given current technology, the best approach is to actually make a small tank, because it's then when you're at the end of that tank, it's changed less, and the first puff is a lot more like, the last puff is a lot more like the first puff. And that just makes sense to us, because that's, when you buy the thing, that's what you want. You don't want the terpene-free CBN sleep bomb that you wind up with other products. Yeah. You want what it was that was on the box. Yeah. And so our philosophy is to try to keep the first and last puffs as close as possible. And then, so besides those things, there's the design of the device itself. There's really good labeling. You know exactly what's in it because it's on the bottom of the device. You know how much is in it because it's written on the back of the device, that 300 there. Yep. So that's 300 milligrams. It's got a nice new logo, and I'd love to talk about that a little bit.
All right, talk about your logo. It's almost like a horseshoe.
It almost is, right? Or a smile.
Or a smile.
Yeah. Or the Ohm symbol.
Or the Ohm symbol upside down.
Or the Omega symbol upside down.
Uh-huh.
And actually, if you open up a Firefly 1, it's actually the shape of our initial heating coil.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And it's all those things. And it actually looks a little bit like Black Rock City and Burning Man.
No, it's pretty great. I know. I like it. No, I like
well, thanks.
it. And it looks good on, you're wearing a t-shirt, a black t-shirt with it, and it's very nice.
Thanks, Joe. Coming up with an abstraction for a Firefly is actually a really hard thing.
Yeah, it's really hard.
But once you incorporate the thing lighting up, which is what a Firefly does, then all of a sudden things come together.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you like it. We're really happy with it. Funny enough, it took years to design.
I believe you.
So it's also designed from the start to be recyclable because it's disposable, right? It's not one-time use, but when it's done, it's done. You don't recharge it, and so part of that is because we think that as we get into the mass market, people want really simple solutions. A lot of people don't want to have another thing to charge in their life, right? You're already charging your phone, your fancy watch, your this.
I've never
or that.
thought of that as an obstacle, but okay, I believe you.
A lot of folks do.
I believe you. Yeah,
right.
You do the market research.
So, but inherent in that is a responsibility of every manufacturer to deal with the physical artifact, the waste. Yeah, you got it.
So how can you recycle something that is both glass and metal?
Well, it's not glass.
The tank is not glass?
No, it's stainless steel.
Oh.
The tank is stainless steel, not plated metal. Importantly, it's stainless, which is completely inert, which is very important, by the way. Using plated metals, well, anyway,
not a good idea.
I would recommend against it. But the way that you do it, Joe, is that you design the parts to be separable when you're done with it, meaning that, and I can show you this later on, we can open up one of these and I'll show you how you separate it into each of its constituent parts.
Love to see that.
Each of which is separable uniquely into its own recycling stream. So for instance, there's a battery that is recyclable as a battery. And you can you drop it off at a battery recycling at like most hardware stores have that now. And there's of course battery plus retailers out there who'll take them.
Yes.
And there's also municipal places that you can recycle batteries. So these batteries are completely recyclable. And in fact, they're actually strategic. They bring cobalt into the United States, which is a strategic material that we don't have much of here. So that's actually one of the highest value things at a smelter.
Oh.
I learned this because I got really into like
So smelters actually want cobalt, is that right?
They do. They want lithium ion batteries. The ones that contain cobalt, they really want because cobalt is valuable. And so they extract some small amount of it out of batteries. And the nature of lithium-ion battery recycling, the economics of it has changed in recent years.
Another podcast.
Another one, yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, the point being that we designed it from the start, Joe, to be recyclable.
I just love that you can go deep on so many topics, Mark. It's really a joy. I have to say.
Well, it's really fun to talk about them with you, Joe.
It just is. It really is fun.
Right back at you.
Can I ask you another question
Sure.
off topic of all of this, which is what surprising what surprising actions have happened of your use of cannabis in the last couple of months? I'm very curious about this because like we all use it and sometimes we have good experiences and sometimes dull experiences and sometimes extraordinary experiences. Has there been anything extraordinary that's occurred to you or thought that happened to you or observation or weird counterintuitive juxtaposition of something that went, boing, wow, that happened to me on cannabis?
Wow, great question.
Hard question.
Yeah.
But I think it's I think it's something I should ask every single person I talk to on this podcast from now on. And of course I'll forget to. But
yes. And I want to give it a considered answer.
Take your time. We have editors here.
Okay, paradoxically,
okay,
the sort of most notable thing has been the breaks I've taken from cannabis. So
interesting. Go on.
So taking time each month to flush out my system, basically, to let my own endocannabinoid system reset to its baseline, basically my own internal hormone production of 2-AG or anandamide, right? And giving that time to reset to its natural level has brought a freshness of experience in whatever other form exogenous cannabinoids I take into my body, whether they be edibles or vaporizing. So basically, I'm taking a week off or more now, actually, every month, usually consecutively, and taking longer breaks, which has made the experiences when I do take in cannabis more powerful yeah. and more desirable. Yeah. And, I'm developing products, so I'm using it. I have to use it a lot. I have to use cannabis a lot.
I'm sorry to hear
Isn't that sad? No, it's awesome. It's totally awesome. Who would have thought we'd be here? My God, what a career. It's great. But sometimes it's a little too much, right? And so the breaks have been a big thing in my life.
Well, it is called receptor resensitization.
Yes.
We did an interview with Dustin Sulek about that 100 episodes ago. And it makes complete sense, really. It's like, clean them out, resensitize them so that you actually need less when you come on again, and that will last for quite some time. Yeah. So, in terms of like efficiency, it's another way of keeping very efficient because you will actually use less and feel the same relief or the same exhilaration or the same whatever you use cannabis for. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for your answer on that.
You bet. There's a follow-up, which is something that. It's something that we've both thought about, I'm sure, for years. But like mindfulness, it's always good to bring yourself back to that sort of a center of focus. And for me, that's keeping set and setting top of mind more before I have an experience. And that's as simple as just being aware of my own mindset going into the experience. And does my mindset and the setting in which I'm consuming support the intention that I have or the state of mind that I want to wind up at? And I know, and it sounds like it. Of course, everyone could say, yeah, of course, yeah, that's very important. But
what's the experience?
But you need to bring your focus back to that. Actually,
what's the experience? Why? What does it give you?
because that, so as it turns out, the quote unquote placebo effect in any drug is often as large as or larger than the effect of the thing itself. The placebo effect is real. We have incredible power to guide the effects of anything we take into our bodies with our intentions. And that doesn't mean that they're the only thing happening. Obviously, there's the effects of the thing that you're taking in, and those are real too. But how you decide how you decide you want to take it matters as much as what you're taking in. Let's say you're in a bad mood, and you're like, I'm mad at that guy at work, or that what a jerk, and you're in and you're outside next to the trash. You just took out the trash. Now you're vaping something, or you're consuming cannabis, and you're mad, and you're thinking about how you're mad about it, and you're next to some unsightly thing. Well, do you think that the chances of the experience being maybe not what you want there are higher? Of course they are, right? And whereas if you would have taken 30 seconds to do a little bit of breathing, let go of that anxiety-causing thought, much as you do as when you meditate, right? Let go of that thought. Find yourself a nice comfy chair, or stand next to a beautiful tree, or just appreciate the sunset, or the beauty of this day in New York, for instance, the nice weather. And that all of a sudden completely changes the trajectory of what your cannabis experience is going to be. And that's an emphasis on set and setting. So I guess I've had a couple experiences recently where the focus on set and setting has really made a big difference for me. So I wanted to just pass that along.
You're getting back to the basics, really.
Yeah, it's really back to the basics. Yeah. So it's always important to keep that in mind.
It's great, Mark. I'm really glad you were able to join me today, and I'm really excited to experience the new Firefly 2 Plus. When is it for sale, and where does one find it?
It's for sale on May 28th, so coming up next week. One can find it in better smoke shops and dispensaries. One can find it online at www.thefirefly.com. And one can find it through our primary distributor, Green Lane, best U.S. distributor in the business by far, and a longtime partner of ours. So if you go to Green Lane, you can find it there. If you come to thefirefly.com, you can find it with us, and you can also find it in a bunch of smoke shops all over.
Thank you for the nerdery of Puffery.
A delight to have the conversation with you, Joe.
Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us. Matthew, what do you think of vaporization, having listened to that interview?
Well, again, I would also personally thank Mark for coming back on the show. We have had him before, and it was a pleasure both times. I think that this conversation is fascinating. I do think that vaporization is going to ultimately overtake traditional smoking of cannabis. I think it's a cleaner experience. I think I hesitate to use the word healthier for you, but you are putting less combusted material in your lungs, which has to be
definitely healthier.
I do love and would like to take a moment to really drive home this sort of ending of the paradigm that you guys spoke about the fat clouds.
The fat cloud, yeah.
Right?
The fat cloud is over, maybe.
I really, and it makes logical sense the way he put it, that you want those particles, that vapor to remain in your body. You want to consume it and get the full effects of that. And breathing out that fat cloud and all those particulates just seems to be counter to that effect. So it's nice to hear somebody say that, you don't have to see it for it to be working.
Yes, I think it's really true. Anyway, I'm glad you got a lot out of it. I certainly did, and it's really a great device. That's all we have to say.
I'm waiting on mine to arrive. I'm super excited to get my hands on one.
You're going to love it. You really are going to love it. You're going to taste so much more, which is amazing.
Hey, Joe, do you remember a while back, there was a news article where people were complaining in Sonoma County about the smell in the air of cannabis?
Of course.
It was pointed out to us from a listener and a Patreon patron that we never really got your on-the-ground nose report from your trip to California. So I was wondering if we could bring that back up. When you were walking around and spending your time out there, did you notice any sort of just passing overwhelming smells from the growth of the cannabis industry?
I must tell you, I lived in Soma when I was there, south of Market Street, and I would walk up the block, and every time I turned the corner, it smelt like a skunk farm. And there was a gray building with no windows. I never saw one human being come in and out of it. It was concrete, cinder block bricks. And the smell of that building was redolent. You could smell it halfway down the block. So I did have a lot of nose experience in the city of San Francisco. San Francisco itself is a very open city to cannabis. So there are a lot of clouds on the street. Although I have to say, living in New York, it's not all that different. So the difference between legalization and decriminalization odoriferously feels very minor to me. I couldn't really tell the difference. And in Sonoma, having as a cannabist, I can't really get behind the complaints about the smell of cannabis. To me, there is no comparison. Would you rather smell a field of cannabis growing or a field of manure?
Well, and
I mean, it's just to me a no-brainer.
Yeah, certainly. And I take it even a little bit further. There was a national holiday here yesterday, so I spent the day out in the park, and there were a lot of people who were partaking and enjoying, and very respectfully of each other and with everyone around. And there were kids playing that you could see, and families out on walks, and a little bit of that smell in the air. And I had no real reaction to it. And at one point, a young lady walked past, and her perfume was so strong that immediately I had an adverse reaction to that, where I was like, "Oh, that's not pleasant." And after smelling cannabis all day, it was lady's perfume that made me think, "Oh, that's too much. That's too strong."
Interesting.
So I don't get it either.
Interesting. Anyway, that was my quick nose report from the streets of San Francisco. Thank you for asking. I just want to tell you quickly that our next episode is really fascinating. It is a deep dive into cannabis for women's issues. We talk a lot about how cannabis can be used as a sexual stimulant, as an attribute for women's health. We talk a lot about vaginas and all sorts of other things that are not normally heard on mainstream media. So I really want to urge you to all tune in. Tell all the women in your life to tune into the next episode, which will be out on June 20th, because we are going to dive very deeply into many things.
Well, and don't just tell all the women tell all the men too, because honestly, I think
me. Absolutely.
Every man,
I really forgive me. Yes, I am
every
wrong.
man can
bad.
Understand, can do to understand women a bit better, I think. And so having that insight, it might be at times more valuable for a good man,
You know what? I really stand corrected, okay? Forgive me, all right? I also want to encourage all of you listeners to consider supporting us on Patreon. You will not hear about vaginal health and cannabis or even the nerdery of puffery in mainstream media. You will hear it here on the Brave New Weed podcast. We are accepting sponsors now, as you know. We are accepting sponsors of products that we love, that we think are valuable, that we believe in. But we really, really, really are still depending on you, our listeners, to help us keep the lights on. So for as low as $1 a month, we just got a sponsor last month for $10, which felt like we hit the bank. Thank you so much. But we really want to hear from you. We want to hear from you. We love your contributions. When we see that new sponsor from Patreon in our email, we clap, we applaud. It's a great feeling. And thank you so much for your current sponsorship. And if any of you feel the urge, have the need, have the desire to keep us going, consider spending a few dollars a month to keep us going.
Thanks again, listeners, for joining us on the cast. We really appreciate each and every one of you, and we hope to see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Brave New Weed podcast. This episode and all future episodes are made possible by amazing listeners like yourself. If you like what you've heard, we encourage you to show your support by giving $1 a month for special access and rewards on patreon.com/bravenewweed. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram via @BraveNewWeed. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/bravenewweed. And remember, you can always find more information about us or information discussed in each episode by pointing your favorite browser to bravenewweed.com.